Hello and welcome to the show. I am here today on BeamNG Drive, going to be doing some more of the, autocrossing. You see, I am naturally very curious as to, what's the fastest way to get around these sort of circuits. Are we better off with, for example, a racing Covet here, or a big, powerful rear-wheel drive muscle car? Likewise, are the hill climb cars the way to go, or are circuit cars going to be the best option? So we're going to do a little experiment. I'm going to take a variety of different cars, all high-spec ones, of course, trying to get around here as quickly as possible, and yeah, see which one comes out the fastest. And the Covet always seems like a good place to start. This one is the tracker version of the Covet. I'm using all base game cars, if you like, no mods for any of this. Also gives us a chance to play around with some of the different cars, some of the different engines that I didn't get to cover last time with this. Now, the circuit is a fairly short autocross one, a fairly technical one, mine. There is a small straight towards the end of the course. It's looking at about a minute-ish in terms of completion time, but that will of course depend on the car. Now, the strength of the Covet is, well, the turning circle is pretty good. There is a decent amount of grip. Its lack of power, I'm hoping we can negate to an extent, because, well, there isn't a huge amount in the way of acceleration, and we can hopefully carry good speed around these loops in places where some of the bigger, heavier cars, maybe some of the all-wheel drive cars, might be struggling with some understeer. The Covet is not having that many issues, although it's still got to be careful getting around there. That it is the acceleration to the finish line. It is, oh wow, that's a quick time. 56.0 from the Covet. So yeah, we're going to be looking at sub 1 minute times. The 1 minute 3 was set by a Miramar that I used to test the course out to see if it's a good course, a course I was interested in. 1 minute 10 was when I crashed. So ignore that one. Ignore that one. 56.029 is the benchmark laid down by our mighty racing Covet. Up next, we have got a race version of the Moonhawk. Certainly sounds fantastic. It's going to have an awful lot of power. It is rear-wheel drive. Might be helpful for trying to get the rear end around some of the tight corners. Equally, might cause problems trying to, put some of that power down and the car just wanting to go sideways. I'm quite expecting that from this. I mean, it's not a crazy, absurdo version of the car. It might actually be helped by the gear ratios that this one here seems to have. A very long first gear will help the car. So, I don't want to really slide the vehicle about too much. You run the risk, of just wasting your time trying to put the power down. That being said, when we are struggling a little bit with understeer, see the Covet, while front-wheel drive still had a bit more turn-in than we're getting from this. And we were doing everything here at kind of 20-30 miles an hour, so I'm going to end up having to kind of grab the handbrake a little bit around some of these corners. Now, don't pay too much attention to the speedo. Unfortunately, with the way that these sort of scenarios work, it just puts in the default one, which is wheel speed rather than air speed. So we're spinning the wheels up, it's going to be a higher speed than the car is actually going. So it's a little bit on the wonky side. I don't think we're going to beat the Covet. Oh, big understeer. We nearly clattered the finish line. It was very, very close. I say it was very close. It was a second behind the Covet. But the track Moonhawk couldn't do it. All of that power, and it just can't quite make it work. That was a very, very close scare crossing the finish line from that. Very close indeed. There we go, the front-wheel drive race Covet. As much as I don't particularly want to say that because I like the Moonhawk, front-wheel drive race Covet, better around this circuit. Our next vehicle is at a completely different end of the spectrum. While it is the highest spec version of the ETK 800 series, it's a massive, heavy estate car. It is all-wheel drive, though. It is all-wheel drive, and that could be very, very helpful for getting the car out of the corners. We can put all of the power down much easier than we could in the likes of the Moonhawk. But there's a lot more bulk. A lot more bulk to try and get around the corners. We haven't got the slick racing tyres on this vehicle. It does sound fantastic. Great sounding engine in these now. Either way, we are going to get underway and see if we can go quicker than that 56 seconds. We've got to be very, very mindful with the understeer. Also got to be very careful with the ETKs because of the very, very fragile wheels. Now, can potentially get away with bumping off the concrete wall a little bit with some cars. With this, I would be very, well, I say be very wary. I'm not planning on, but you might not get away with it in this car whatsoever, especially if we're doing, well, this heavy steering. You've got your wheel kind of quite exposed. Oh, God, the understeer, struggling. Got to again go for a bit of a grab of a handbrake. Oh, it's all-wheel drive, but it can still get the back end out. Yeah, if we're turning and we clip a wall, we may well snap a wheel off or snap the steering, and that will funnily enough, not help with the old autocrossing. Come on, get around here. I don't really want to be having the car going sideways. This is where we should be good. I say we should be good. The time isn't going to be enough. It's only a 58.5. Couldn't do it. We're 2.5 seconds down on that Covet. While the all-wheel drive traction is brilliant, do not get me wrong, the all-wheel drive traction is very, very nice out of the corners. It's too much car to try and get around those tight sections, and it loses out to the Moonhawk. It's well, third place currently. I think that might fall down the order a little bit more before the end of this. Now, you might be wondering why I haven't gone for the racing or the hill climb version of the Pazima. The answer, though, is simple. I've got the all-wheel steer one, and that should be very, very helpful. That increased, or decreased, I guess you should say, turning circle. It'll get around these corners significantly better. It might handle a little bit strangely. All-wheel steer cars are a little bit different to a drive, but that turning should be much improved, and I'm hoping that is going to give us an edge with this car. Now, the downside, of course, is that we don't have slick tyres, and neither are we all-wheel drive. It might not work, but it's definitely worth a try, because anything is suited to this sort of thing. I mean, it's still a relatively quick vehicle. It's still a relatively sporty version of the Pazima. You can see the way, it's a really weird thing to watch, the way that this car gets turned in. But it is going to be, I think, quite helpful around here. Again, if it gets anywhere even remotely near the race cars, I think that's a win for the Pazima, considering tyres and considerably less power. It's not even turbocharged, this particular one. But the hope is that we can carry that speed through the corners that some of the other cars can't. We might not have the same chronic understeer. That being said, it's still it's understeering through the similar sort of places as you would perhaps expect a car to. You see the way it's such a weird thing. You don't really notice it. The only times I've really driven this car are on the Reckoning, the Destruction series, in which it is a little bit weird to drive, but the car does get broken so quickly that you don't really notice it. But when you're driving it through here, it's very weird watching what the rear end is doing. It's not going to be enough, though. It's only a 102 from the Pazima. It's a strange one to drive, and quite good fun to drive around there. In the end, not got the power to compensate, not got the grip to compete with the likes of the race Covet. It was worth a go, though. You know, the all-wheel steer, it was an idea, and I think it does help it over a normal, if it's just a normal Pazima, but that's not enough. That Covet is proving to be a mighty tough vehicle to beat. Well, we move from an all-wheel steer car to something that might fall over. Yes, we've got the off-road version of the D-Series. Plenty of power, huge amounts of power in this supercharged V8. It is, of course, all-wheel drive. Again, very, very helpful, but also very high riding on fairly soft suspension. To be honest, I don't think it's going to be going quite fast enough to actually fall over around this course, although if we clip the concrete barriers in a slightly awkward way, that could well tip it over. It doesn't take a huge amount to roll this vehicle. It's also, of course, relatively heavy, which probably won't help it. It's just, again, it's the change of direction around here that's going to be the problem. There we go. We can get it around. It's not doing too badly, but again, it's that front end doesn't get turned in the way that the Covet did. The way that, funnily enough, the race car Covet gets turned into these corners is much, much better. We can make up some time, I think, with the power. Come on, get around that corner. Oh, are we going to be able to go quicker than the 800 series? That's probably the bigger rival for this. Again, I haven't got slick tyres on this, of course. We've got off-road tyres on this, so less suited to the situation, if you like. But, of course, much enjoy taking cars well outside of their respective comfort zones. It's across the line, a 102.5. Not too bad. It's a tenth of a second down on that all-wheel steer position, but for an off-road truck, though, around an autocross course, that's not too bad. It didn't get close to falling over. We got very close to clipping a few walls in places. Didn't get close, though, to falling over. Still, some 6 seconds down on the race Covet. Well, it's time to get a little bit serious. Yes, the Sunburst track car is going to have a try. As you can see, slick tyres, all-wheel drive, plenty of power. However, will it suffer from a little too much understeer around here in comparison to the Covet? I don't know. We will very quickly find out. I think this will probably have enough to go quicker than the Covet. Yeah, judging by the way that's getting turned into these corners, I would say it's probably got as good a returning as the Covet. We've got more power and we've got a better driveline for distributing that power down to the road. Or we've slightly used the concrete there to get the back of our car turned around here. We are okay. Launch our way out of the next corner. Or got very, very, very close to, a little too close to the wall there, bouncing the Sunburst up into the air. The turbo lag is actually a little bit of a problem, though, with this. I kind of want to be... I don't really want to keep it in second because it's just not going to get going out of these corners. And if we don't have it in second, we do kind of spin the wheels up. I've got to be mindful around that final corner. It's going to be enough, though, as across the line the Sunburst goes to take a lead by almost 2 seconds from the Covet. Kind of expected. Kind of expected, in all honesty, with the Sunburst. You know, it's got the grip, it's got the traction, and got the power as well. Covet's a nicer car to drive, though. Covet is a nicer car to drive, and that's not a bad showing still from the little front-wheel drive hatchback to be that close. To be that close to a mighty Sunburst race car. Sticking with the theme of track cars, we've got a 200BX up next. Again, slick tyres, quite a lot of steering lock going on here, plenty of power, although a potentially turbo-laggy engine, but rear-wheel drive in this. Unlike the Sunburst, we are not going to have the massivest amount of traction out of the corners. I'm hoping we'll have more grip than the Demon version of this, as I found out last time I went autocrossing, but still sliding about oversteer is a potential issue. That being said, it was even for the all-wheel drive Sunburst. Nope, second gear doesn't work. Second gear is completely stupid in these cars. It's a little bit of a pain. It's a little bit of a pain because you find yourself in, like that, for example, as you're going to get out of a corner, there's no power. Suddenly it wants to dump all of the power through the rear wheels, and that's when you're wasting time. Again, we are still struggling to get the front end turned in to an extent around here. It's probably about the same, perhaps. I still feel like the Covet was a nicer car to drive through these corners. Can we, though, make the most of the speed? That's where this is going to find it. I don't think it's any better through the corners than the Covet, and moments like that are going to cost it, I feel. It's right towards the line. He took off the rear bumper. I was trying to get that run to the line, and it is not going to be able to beat the Covet. Interestingly, it doesn't beat the Moonhawk either. It falls to 4th place. I think the turbo lag in that engine around a course that tight is what does it. The Moonhawk had a lovely long first gear, and first was pretty much perfect for the entire course, whereas this, you were kind of first, kind of second, wanted to throw its back end around. It's going to be a 4th place. It's going to be a 4th place for the 200BX for now. Interesting result. Interesting result. Race muscle car beats race kind of modern sports car. Up next, we have got a Burnside that I'm hoping might be able to cause a little bit of an upset. This is the custom version of the Burnside. Plenty of power in this. Perhaps the least wobbly of suspension. Still quite wobbly, though. Still quite wobbly suspension. Let's face it, this is a rather old vehicle. Unlikely to be the easiest of cars to drive around here. Probably won't have the best brakes either. Oh god, the front end doesn't really turn into the corners, and then the back kind of does its own thing. We're going to understeer quite a lot. Yeah, funnily enough, Wobblematic suspension is not the best. As I said, this is the least wobbly kind of option you get for the Burnside. It's going to be kind of an oversteer your way around there, because the front end does not turn at all. Doesn't really work. Oh, we're going to... Yeah, I think that's going to... It's not going to be quick. Oh, that understeer. We've got problems. The Burnside was not a good choice. Well, I'll tell you it was not a good choice. I mean, it's a spectacular choice. Oh, we're just running like a couple of millimetres away from the concrete. We're running a couple of millimetres away from the concrete at extremely slow speeds. So it doesn't... We're not really running that much risk. We're also already... The Covet's already finished by now. The Covet's already done with the autocross course. This is going to be a very much last place for the for the Burnside. It was entertaining. It was entertaining and rather difficult and rather different to drive around here. It's only 3 seconds faster than when I crashed Murama. It's not good though. The front end doesn't grip, the rear end doesn't grip, funnily enough. So you kind of chuck the car around with a lot of the handbrake and waste much time. But good fun. Good fun, nevertheless, and that's the important thing, really. I am certainly hoping that we're not going to have a Wobblematic suspension with our next vehicle. We've got a racing Bolide. Now, unlike the 200BX and the Sunburst, while this has got a decent amount of power, it's probably not quite as quick as them in terms of ultimate straight line speed. It doesn't have big turbos on it, so we're not going to be having any of that turbo lag, and I'm hoping perhaps not quite as slidey, certainly as a 200BX. We will have to wait and see on that front. Oh, does feel like a good amount of grip, in fact, with this vehicle. The front end, I mean, we're going to get understeer, I think, inevitably around it. It's such a tight circuit that we're going to struggle with getting the front end turned through at some of these corners. However, interestingly, I can pretty much be flat out of these corners, even though it's a rear-wheel drive car, a relatively powerful race version. There's no oversteer, so to speak. You can probably upset it if you want to, but on the whole, it's actually looking pretty good around here. However, it is a little bit understeery, and I say that. It's struggling, I think, to get turned in as well as some other cars. Perhaps mid-engined isn't helping it with a lot of the weight off the front of the vehicle. Oh, it tried to snap on me there. It's across the line. It's a 55. 55.5. It is quicker. It's half a second quicker than the Covet. Still a fair way down on the Sunburst. Perhaps not quite as far down as you might expect, though. That's... I mean, that's a good time, but it still, though, shows just how good that Covet is. Only half a second away from a full-on supercar race spec vehicle. Yeah, as the Bolide is a nice car, actually. It's a very nice car to drive around that circuit. Another ETK is going to have a try. The K series is, well, both smaller and lighter than the 800 series, I believe with the same engine, all-wheel drive this. So theoretically, we would expect to see this go quicker. Will it be quick enough to mix it with the likes of the Moonhawk race car, the Covet, perhaps? I don't think we're going to have the grip. Ultimately, I don't think we're going to have the grip. While we are, I suspect, going to be very good out of the corners. Yeah, there's a fair amount of understeer to be expected, but going on with this car, it means you can't carry the speed. Is also already showing that it'd be relatively happy to wiggle the back of the car around if it so needs. We're using a little bit of a handbrake there to help get the car turn. I don't really want to use too much handbrake because once the car starts sliding, even though it's all-wheel drive, it kind of wants to continue sliding, and that's perhaps not so helpful. Again, it's wasting time. And around here, you don't want to be wasting... We've only got a 56-second lap, potentially. You don't want to be wasting any more time than is absolutely necessary, but sometimes you're going into these corners and it's just not going to turn. So it's kind of grab the hand... I've used this technique before in various sort of series. You grab the handbrake just enough to get the back of the car turned, but not so much that you lose traction. Oh, that's a quick time. It doesn't beat the Covet, though. It's a 56.0. It does beat the Moonhawk and the 200BX race car. It's much nicer than the 800 series around here. That all-wheel drive traction is helping it no end and a fair amount of power to boot. But the Covet is that bit better around the corners. That's close. I mean, it's less than a tenth between the pair of them, but the Covet is holding fast in that top three. But a good showing, nevertheless, from the K series. Well, this is the big one. Can the Sunburst be knocked off the top of the leaderboard by a hill climb car? The SBR4 is perhaps the fastest of the hill climb cars. However, there are some downsides. Yes, there is a lot of power, but it is, again, a very, very big turbocharged engine, or a very small, I should say small with big turbocharging, perhaps. I don't actually know what engine these have. I think they have a flat 4, flat 6, something in there. Sounds different to the last time I drove one of these, but big turbo comes turbo lag, which we have seen cause some vehicles issues. The aero parts on this car, while massively impressive, are going to be useless here. Completely useless. We're not going fast enough. We're simply not going fast enough to use them. The all-wheel drive, though, and the massive power will be helpful. That acceleration out of the corners, and let's face it, is a very good chassis to begin with. I would be surprised if it doesn't beat the Sunburst. However, there are potential downsides to this vehicle. That launch is so crazy, so crazily fast, accelerating down towards the next corner. This feels faster than the last time I drove it, but I think that's just because I'm used to driving it on wide open areas, not on a confined space like this, although that speed does bring with it its own difficulties. It's very easy to overshoot a corner because you're suddenly going much faster than you ever expected. No, that's okay. I tried putting a second to try and kind of preempt the way it's going to accelerate, but that should end up with a big load of turbo lag. We had to put it there just to try and calm the car down. It got very excitable. This is like a very, very happy dog. It is very excited and very, very keen to show the amount of speed that it has got in it. It's going to go quickest. It's going to go quickest by just over a second. It's a brutally, brutally fast car, as you would, well, imagine. Let's face it, from the SBR4. Not that easy to drive around there, though. There is just so much power trying to escape that the all-wheel drive can't quite contain it. It got a bit twitchy and flicked itself around a few corners. In the end, though, doesn't really matter so much. It's just so bloody fast to overcome all of that, and it will be our... Oh, I was hoping it was going to show the times up on the little side bit. There we go. So we have got, yeah, the SBR4 will claim victory. Second to the Sunburst track car. Third will go to the Bolide. A very, very good showing from that Covet. I still think perhaps the most fun car to drive around here. I was expecting it to do a pretty decent time, but perhaps not go so close to, well, I mean, even though the all-wheel drive monster is only a couple of seconds down the road, that's a great, great time from the Covet. Third would go to, not third, sorry, fifth would go to the K-Series, beating the Moonhawk track car. That's another very, very good time, though, from that Moonhawk. Seventh, we have the 200BX. Eighth, we've got the 800 series. All-wheel drive power, good. A big, heavy estate car, not quite so much. The Bazima all-wheel steer in ninth lacked the power, lacked the acceleration, but the all-wheel steer part was rather good. And let's not forget, you know, that's a fairly normal road car against, well, top-of-the-line and, well, race cars. So, to put that in perspective, it's a good time. It does manage to beat the off-road D series, 1 minute 2 from that didn't fall over around the course, the Miramar street car, and then we have the Burnside that was an absolute faff. I think a faff is the best way to describe it, but entertaining nevertheless to try and drive it. I love these courses. These are great fun. These are great fun to go driving around, and a really interesting challenge. Yes, when you have this much power in a race-prepared car, is always likely to go very fast. The Covet, though, I think is still kind of a winner, certainly for entertainment and certainly for power to speed, power to lap time, if you like. That Covet will probably have everything beaten. Although maybe it's not such a surprise in that it's a lot more designed for this kind of thing than, well, the hill climb car that's designed for a lot bigger areas. Yeah, this is a really cool edition. I highly recommend if you haven't checked out Beam for a little while. This last update was very good indeed for some new and some different stuff. But now we're just going to mess around with a very powerful all-wheel drive hill climb car. That's going to be it, though, for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.